Hi everyone, welcome to another video. In this video, I'll be talking about the position that you see on the board, queen versus pawn on the 7th rank. So we'll be looking at various kinds of pawns, starting with the rook pawn, knight pawn, bishop pawn, and also the center pawns, which you can also call as the D and E pawns or the queen and king pawns. Now, as you can see, I have highlighted the squares with red and green colors. So that red color means that the rook and bishop pawns is a draw, and the other pawns are winning. The knight and center pawns are winning. So let's look at one by one. How few are winning, the others are draw. Now, what is the advantage of knowing such endings is that one obvious advantage is if you're the attacking side or the winning side, then you know how to convert this easily. And the other advantage is if you are the defending side, then you know instantly that this is a draw. So first let's start with the D and E pawn, the center pawns. And for the course of this video we'll be following certain themes. Those are: first is activate your queen and stop the opponent from promoting his pawn. The second thing is force the opponent king to go behind his pawn. This square, this is where we want his king. And once you have forced the opponent's king behind his pawn, so which is your theme number two, the third theme is to slowly activate your king and get it closer into the game. So let's see how we can achieve this. So in this case, white has just promoted and black has played e3, his pawn from e3 to e2. So the way to win this position is, first you have to stop black's king from promoting his pawn and get your queen closer to the king, opponent's king. So first you play queen d5 check. Let's say he plays king e3. Now you play queen c5 check. Now with queen c5 check, your threat is to play queen c1. And once, if the opponent allows you to play queen c1, then it's completely lost. You can, next move you're going to play queen e1. So he's not going to do that. So as an example, if he plays king d3, then in this case you can play queen c1 check. And notice how you're controlling these two diagonals, and his king has only two legal squares. No matter wherever he goes, you're going to play queen e1 and it's completely lost. So he's not going to do that. So after queen c5 check, he's going to play king d2, stopping queen c1, as well as he's stopping queen c1, as well as he's threatening to promote his pawn. So what do you do next? Now you keep checking him and get your queen even closer. So now notice that after queen d4 check, if he plays king e1, then he is already giving us time to get our king into the game, which is what we want. So he's not going to do that. He's going to play king c2. So now his threat is to promote the pawn. It doesn't matter where he goes, even if he goes to c1 or c2, you follow the same thing. So let's say if he goes to c1 or c2, you're going to play queen e3 and stop his pawn from promoting and also attack his pawn. So now the only way to defend his pawn is he should play king d1. So now comes the main move. So whenever you achieve this position with the opponent's king on the first rank and the pawn on the second rank and your queen on the third rank here. So whenever you achieve this position, remember you have to play queen d3 check. Now notice that he can't play king c1 because you simply take his pawn and you're winning. So the only move is king e1. Now we have achieved our two themes. The first theme was to activate our queen, which we have already done, and the second theme was to force his king to go behind his pawn, which is also achieved. Now remember the third theme, get your king into the game. Now after king f7, now he has two moves, either king f2 or king f1. King f1 is not good because he is not achieving anything with king f1 because the pawn is pinned and he hasn't made any progress. He has no threats basically, so he's not going to do that. So he's going to play king f2, and now his threat is to again promote. Now what do? Again, give queen f5 check activate your queen. Now you know that if he plays king e3, you play queen g5 check. Now your threat is to go queen g1 and get your queen to e1. So he's not going to allow that. So he's going to play queen f2, king f2. Now you play queen f4 check. Now if he plays king e1, then he's giving us a move. You can get your king into the game further. So he's not going to do that. He's going to again play king g2. Now what do? You attack his pawn. Now the only way to support his pawn is to play king f1. Now we have again achieved the position where the king is on the first rank, pawn is on second, and the king queen is on the third rank. So a queen f3 check. So the only way he can keep playing is to play king e1. If he plays king g1, you just take the pawn. So he's going to play king e1. Now what do? Once his king is forced behind the pawn, you're going to get your king into the game. So you keep repeating this pattern. Now again he's going to play king d2. You play queen d5 check. Going to play king e3, let's say. Now you play queen c5 check, again threatening queen c1. So again he's going to play king d2, stopping queen c1. Now what do? You play queen d4 check, king c2, or king c1, doesn't matter. You play queen e3. Now king d1 is the only move. Now you play queen d3 check. Now he's forced to go behind his pawn. Now you get your king into the game further. So you keep repeating this until your king is close enough and you're completely winning. So again, once you get your king into the game, he's going to play king f2. Now you play queen f5 check. Going to play king e3. You play queen g5 check, threatening queen g1. So he's going to stop king queen g1 with king f2. Now you play queen f4 check, king g2, queen e3, attacking the pawn. Only way to defend is king f1. Play queen f3 check. The king is forced to go behind the pawn, and now you again get your king into the game even further. So now is king d2. Then you play queen 3 check, queen c3 check. Now the only possibility is king d1. Now you play queen d3 check, king e1. Now what do? You get your king into the game. Now he is forced to play king f1, and now you're completely winning after this. So play queen e2 check, he plays king g1, and you play king f3, and the only legal move he has is king h1, and queen g2 is checkmate. Now let's look at how to win when your opponent has a d pawn. The approach or the themes remain the same. Activate your queen, stop him from promoting, and force the king to go behind the pawn. Then slowly get your king into the game. So as usual, you start giving checks. You play queen e6 check. Let's say he plays king d3. You play queen f5 check. So now your idea is to go queen f1 and then go queen d1. So he's not going to allow that. So he's going to stop queen f1 with king e2. Now you close in with the queen with queen e4 check. Now if he goes to d1, then you get your king into the game. So you have managed to get his king behind the pawn. So he's not going to do that. So either he plays king f1 or king f2, doesn't matter. So in either of the cases, let's say he plays king f2, you play queen d3. He plays king e1. Only way to save his pawn. Only way to protect his pawn. So now you play queen e3 check. King d1 is forced, and slowly you get your king into the game. Now again he can't play king c1 as it is not making any progress. So he's going to play king c2, trying to promote. Now what do? You again give him checks. So you play queen c5 check. So as soon as he comes to d3, you can either play queen b5 check or queen f5 check. So in both cases, the idea is to go either queen b1 or queen f1. So let's say if you go queen b5 check, now the idea is to come queen b1, queen d1. So he's going to stop it with king c2. Now you close in with queen c4 check. So again, he won't go behind his pawn. He's going to play king b2. You play queen d3, attacking the pawn. So the only way to defend his pawn is king c1. After king c1, you play queen c3 check. So king d1 is the only move. Now you close in with your king. Again he plays queen e2, king e2. You play queen e5 check, king d3, queen f5 check, king e2, queen e4 check, king f2, queen d3, king e1, queen e3 check, king d1 is forced, and you play king d5. Again king c2, queen c5 check. So let's say he plays king b2, you play queen b4 check, king c2, queen c4 check, king b2, queen d3, king c1 is forced. Now you play queen c3 check, forcing his king behind the pawn, and once he goes behind the pawn, you get your king into the. So the only two moves are for him now available are king e1 or king e2. Let's say he plays king e2. Now you play queen f3 check. So king e1 is the only legal move. Queen e3 check. King d1 is forced, and after king d3 you're winning. So king c1 is the only move. Queen d2 check. King b1 only move. King c3, king a1, and it's a checkmate. So I hope you have got a fair bit of idea on the technique to win this position. So the next thing is the knight pawn. So although I have already shown you the d and e pawns, so the approach for the knight pawn also remains the same. So I'm just quickly going to go through the moves how to win if the opponent has a knight pawn. So you play queen c6 check. So let's say he plays king b3. You play queen d5 check. The plan is to go queen d1 next, and once if you achieve queen d1 and queen b1, then it's game over. So he's not going to allow that. He's going to play king c2, stopping that. You play queen c4 check, king d2, queen b3 attacking the pawn. King c1 is the only move. Queen c3 check, king b1, and now you get your king into the game. Whenever his king goes behind the pawn, you get your king into the game. So he's going to play king a2. Now you play queen a5 check. So if he plays king b1, then already you get your king into the game. So he's not going to do that. He's going to play king b3. Now whenever he goes to king b3, you again play queen e4 check with the idea of queen d1. So he's forced to go to c2, and you go queen c4 check, king d2, queen b3, king c1, queen c3 check. He's forced to go behind his pawn, get your king into the game. Just repeat this approach or this technique until your king is close enough. So queen e4, king c2, queen c4, king d2, queen b3 attacking his pawn, king c1 is the only move, queen c3 check, king b1, and you get your king into the game. Again queen a2, king a2, queen a5 check, king b3. Now in this case, since your king has closed in, you can play queen b4 check. So you can either go here or here. So it doesn't matter where he goes, you're going to play queen c4 check. Now he's forced to go to d2. Now you play queen b3 check, king c1, queen c3 check, king b1, only way to protect his pawn, and you close in with your king. Now he plays king a2 check. Sorry, he is going to play king a2. Now what you do is you play queen a3 check. The only legal move he has is to go king b1, and your king is already close enough for you to win. So king c1 is the only move. Now you play queen b2 check, and after king d1, queen d2 is checkmate. Now finally let's look at the bishop pawns and the rook pawns, and let's see why these are a draw. What is that black has here? There is a certain idea that black has here, because of which these positions or the bishop and rook pawns are a draw. So we are going to follow the same approach that we followed for the other pawns. So we are going to activate our queen. So we play queen b5 check. So in this case, black is going to play king a2. We play queen a4 check. He's going to come back to b2. We play queen b4 check, and he's going to repeat with king a2. Now whenever you go queen c3 and attack his pawn, he's going to support it. So this is the only way. Now you play queen b3 check. Now if you notice, the difference is in the other positions when your pawns were on the center files or on the knight pawn, whenever you played this check, he had to go he had to go behind the pawn to protect this pawn. He had to go behind the pawn to protect his pawn. So, but in case of the bishop pawn and the rook pawn, he has this resource with him, which is king a1. So notice you can't take the pawn, because if you take the pawn, then it's stalemate. This is the reason why the bishop and rook pawns draw. Now let's look at quickly why the rook pawn is a draw. So let's say this case black has a a2 pawn. Again, you play queen b5 check. Now let's say black plays king c2. You play queen c4 check, king b2, queen b4 check, king c2. You play queen a3, attacking the pawn. The only way to support his pawn is king b1. Now whenever you play queen b3 check, he's going to play king a1. So this is the idea with the rook pawns. So you see, with the bishop pawn as well as the rook pawn, he's going to play this move king a1, and you can't make any progress. Now if you play something like king e7, then it's already a stalemate. And if you give any checks, it's just going to repeat. Now you might play something like king queen d1, but it's not going to achieve much, because now he plays king b2 and his the threat is to promote, and it's a draw after that. Now again, if you play some checks, then he's just going to keep his king close to this square, and whenever your queen closes in, he's going to come back to a1. So let's say queen a3, king b1, queen b3 check, and king a1. This is the idea why, this is the main idea for black, and this is why the bishop pawns as well as the rook pawns are a draw and other pawns are winning. There are positions where the bishop and the rook pawns are still winning. There are positions where these pawns are still winning, but generally these are the positions where the white's king is very close. So the white's king is very close. Let's say it is on b4 or c4, something like that. So maybe I'll try to make another video on this, on what positions are still winning for a bishop and rook pawn. So I hope you got something out of this video. And if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. And if you like the content, please leave a like, and suggestions are always welcome in the comment section. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.